Well, Australia's peak Jewish body has warned of the danger of repeated anti-Semitic attacks going unpunished. In recent weeks, Australia has witnessed a troubling surge in anti-Semitic incidents, including racist graffiti referencing the Holocaust and targeted attacks on synagogues in Sydney. These acts of hate range from spray-painted swastikas to offensive slogans, and they've sparked outrage and calls for immediate action. While law enforcement has initiated investigations, arrests remain pending. Heightened concerns about the normalisation of hate speech and its escalation into criminal acts. Australia's peak Jewish body has launched a scathing attack on Anthony Albanese for saying his government has done what we can to tackle anti-Semitism, comparing the Prime Minister's record in curbing discrimination to touting economic achievements during a depression. That comes as the principal of a private independent school has been condemned for making a series of public posts calling to destroy the Zionist regime and for all Zionists to burn in the pits of hellfire. Alex Rivchin further criticised the government's tendency to dilute condemnations of anti-Semitism by pairing them with generic statements addressing Islamophobia and other forms of racism. Instead of just discussing this, we need actual solutions and action. And what I've suggested is a roundtable discussion with religious leaders and the implementation of mandatory minimum sentences for anyone who is convicted of this rubbish. The co-chief executive of the Executive Council of Australian Jewry, Alex Rivchin, I'm delighted to say, joins me on the line. Alex, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Well, mate, how is the Jewish community firstly feeling at the moment, given the escalation in these abhorrent attacks?
Look, we're feeling a whole range of things. And, you know, historically, when we felt the brunt of anti-Semitism as we do now, it's actually led to a kind of resurgence of Jewish pride. We've banded together to fight those who are fighting us. That's historically been the reaction of the Jewish community. And I'm seeing it here in Australia. There's a great deal of love and pride and connectedness in the Jewish community. People who long lapsed in their connection to the community and their observation of Jewish traditions have now stepped forward. We're also feeling a lot of love and support from fellow Australians who contact us every day. But at the same time, there's a great deal of anxiety and fear. We wake up every morning not knowing what's going to hit us. And, you know, day by day, new synagogues get attacked, new threats get leveled at the Jewish community, and it's not a way that we want to live. We don't want to live with constant security concerns and been unable to welcome people into our homes and synagogues. That's not who we are as a people. That's not how we want to live in this country.
Alex, I got pretty fired up about this yesterday on the program, and I've started describing these attacks as domestic terrorism because I'm sick of the politicians and even the police skirting around what these people are actually doing. Do you agree? Is this domestic terrorism?
I agree with you 100%. And I think for 15 months we've been talking about fraying social cohesion and community harmony and relations, and I think these terms have become a nonsense that we need to move beyond them. When you talk about synagogues being torched, and we had another attempt to burn a synagogue in Newtown just a few days ago, you're not dealing with social cohesion anymore. You're well beyond that. You're dealing with a national security imperative. And they are domestic terrorists. That's what these people are. They are targeting peaceful civilian infrastructure. They're trying to harm civilians in order to pursue a political agenda. That is exactly what terrorism is. And I think the sooner the government realizes the sort of crisis that we're in, it can then act accordingly and set its policies accordingly. But as long as we're in this kind of backward phase of talking about social cohesion and community harmony, we won't be able to move forward and actually deal with the crisis that we're in.
Alex, I'm of the view that there needs to be a deterrent to this sort of behaviour, and I revealed off the top of the show that 28 people have been charged under Section 93Z of the Crimes Act, which makes it an offence to publicly threaten or incite violence on the grounds of religion, etc. Admittedly, the vast majority of them are still before the courts, but those who have already been sentenced, they've copped either a fine of a few $100s or a community corrections order. Now, I wouldn't have thought that's a sentence that meets community expectations. What say you?
I agree entirely, and you're absolutely correct. There is no deterrent, and there's never been a deterrent. When you look at what happened in the immediate aftermath of October 7, when the horrors of those atrocities, the scale of them was just coming to light about the level of sexual assault and torture, murder, burning, abductions, when you have people in the streets of our city celebrating joyously, praising the attacks, calling for more such attacks, and nothing happened to those people. We all know what happened on October 9th with the Opera House steps, with that national shame. Nothing happened to those people. You've seen academics who are still receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars in public funds and grants relentlessly attacking, harassing, threatening Jewish Australians. They still hold their positions. Nothing happens. So one form of consequence is through the criminal justice system, and that, as you point out, has been too slow, too fickle, too ineffective. But there's also societal consequences. People need to understand that if they're going to daub slogans praising Hitler, swastikas on public buildings in Australia, they will become social outcasts and pariahs. But instead, in many circles, these people are hailed as heroes, as people standing up to Zionism and Zionist oppression, and that sort of thing has to stop.
Alex, you spoke then about academics, and there's a story today in the Telegraph about a principal of a private independent school in Young who's made a series of posts on Facebook calling to destroy the Zionist regime and for all Zionists to burn in the pits of hellfire. Surely the police should be knocking on his door at some point today.
I would like to think so. And again, there need to be consequences first in terms of criminal justice, and they should get a visit from the police, absolutely, but also from his colleagues, from the people that he admires and respects, from public figures. They should come out and say this is absolutely abhorrent and unacceptable. And too often, people hoodwink the public by getting away with these sorts of calls for violence against Jewish people by using euphemisms like Zionist. It's something that came about in the 1950s and 60s in the Soviet Union, to move away from using Jew and starting to use Zionist. But the accusations, the threats were identical. So we need to look beyond the form and look at the substance. And when someone's calling for Zionists to burn in hell, they're calling for virtually every Jewish person to burn in hell. Unequivocally, that's what that is, and this person needs to be dealt with and face the consequences of these calls.
Now, I suggested in my introduction, Alex, that we need to find solutions, and I've highlighted that we need minimum mandatory sentences or a standard non-parole period for these sorts of offences. What about my idea of a round table with all of the religions and an agenda which would be a simple request to all members of the various religions to refrain from showing disrespect for members and buildings for all religions in our beloved Australia? Is that something you'd attend?
I certainly would, and I think the more engagement and more conversations we have is certainly a good thing, and there's been too little of that. And there's been too little willingness to speak up publicly and denounce what's happening. And there's been a failure to recognise that when a house of worship in our country burns, it's not an attack merely on the Jewish community, it's an attack on our basic freedoms and rights in this country to practice our religion, to be who we are. Slowly but surely, piece by piece, we've been losing our national character as a country. This country's been changing. We've been saying over and over again, this can't be who we are. But when these things happen on a daily basis, after a while, it does become who we are. This is sadly who we are, but we need to wrest our community back. We need to seize our country back from extremism before we cease to recognise our country any further.
Has it reached a point where we need either police or security at these synagogues, given the fear that the Jewish community has for these places of worship?
Well, Jewish communal facilities have had high levels of security for many years, and we faced threats even in peacetime to Jewish daycare centres and schools and communal facilities of all sorts. It's a sad reality. It's an indictment of life in Australia that this sort of thing is necessary. But certainly in this current climate of domestic terrorism, as you say, of threats to national security, I think we need to look at rapidly increasing those levels of security. But again, it's sad that it's needed, and no one wants to live that way. I don't like dropping my kids off to their daycare centre with armed guards standing in front. Why on earth in Australia in 2025 are men with guns standing outside learning facilities for children? And the simple answer is because there are people that wish us dead and people that want to harm us, people who want to burn us in our synagogues, in our schools. And the fact that we're not, as a society, fighting this, the fact that this is still viewed as a Jewish problem to be fought, there is no national mass movement of good, decent people standing up publicly and saying, we will not stand for this. An attack on one is an attack on us all. But sadly, we've spoken a lot about the failures of leadership at the federal government level. I think that's true. But that failure of leadership is far wider than that. There should be sports figures and institutions and arts and culture and business leaders all coming out publicly and saying, we will not tolerate this in our country. But it's not happening at the moment.
Alex, what a powerful conversation we've had this morning, and I will give you a gold-plated guarantee while I'm behind this microphone. I'll continue to call out this behaviour and stand in solidarity with the Jewish community, in particular in Sydney, because this is not the Australia that I know. This is not the Australia that I love, and this needs to stop. We can't have your community living in fear, all because of these scumbags who are out there defacing property and preying upon places of worship which are supposed to be sacred. You keep fighting the good fight, mate, and anytime you need to jump on and have a chat, you just let me know, okay?
Thank you so much, Mike. Really appreciate your support and your courage. Thank you.
All right, mate. That's Alex Rivchin, the co-CEO of the Executive Council of the Australian Jury. What a well-spoken man about such a divisive issue. A few people stopped me yesterday when I was out and about and said, Mark, good on you for firing up on the show this morning about all of this. I just have no idea why we aren't seeing the same from our political leaders. Yes, Chris Minns has been very strong on all of this, and for that he should be applauded. But it's now time to follow through with action. It's all well and good to stand in front of a television camera and look down the barrel and say to the people of Sydney and the people of Australia, we do not tolerate this, we do not stand for this, these people will be dealt with under the full force of the law. Well, I just outlaid what the full force of the law is. 28 people have been charged under 93Z. They've been put before the courts. Yes, the vast majority is still entitled to their day in court. But those who have been sentenced, they've been given a monetary penalty of a couple of $100 or a community corrections order. Where is the deterrent for this behaviour? They're hate crimes. So if we haven't got the faith and the politicians haven't got the faith in the judges and magistrates to impose sentences that act as a deterrent for the remainder of the community, we'll impose mandatory minimum sentences. And if there's a problem constitutionally from the High Court when it comes to mandatory minimum sentences, you know what you do? You set a non-parole period. That way these people are locked up. That way these people are dealt with properly. And that way the entire community are told that we will not stand for this sort of rubbish. There's a section of our community that is living in fear, and that is simply unacceptable. Enough is enough. 20